welcome back to Andromeda. It's been a long time since I recorded a video. I've been making some slow and steady progress since then, and today I thought maybe it'd be good just to show off all of the spells that exist in the game, because when I've shown my gameplay previews before, you start with very few spells and I don't get a bunch of them after just a short time starting from the beginning of the game. This is a special tester character that I've created, and also a special room with infinite spawning blue slimes, the easiest enemy in the game. And they'll give me plenty of fodder to show off all the spells that exist. The one thing you might see here is this is the most basic starting spell that you may have seen before if you watch the other videos. This is auto aim now. I found I had it so that whatever direction you were last walking in or currently are walking in when you fire your spell, that's the direction that your spell goes off in. But for a lot of people that was a little too difficult to coordinate, so I've added an auto aim, and it just automatically aims towards the closest monster to you who is within your line of sight. But I've made it so you can turn it off easily. No big deal. Most of the time when I play, I just leave it off, but probably for most people it'd be pretty good. So that's Spell Burst. This one you've seen before too, Magic Missile. You can see when you don't charge up very much, you don't get many magic missiles. They don't do a lot of damage. They're not very big or visually impressive. But if you charge up more, you get more missiles. They all home in. They're just bigger. They do more damage individually. You kill things a lot more quickly with them. That's magic missiles. Oh, also I'll point out that the one little bit of flame, white flame you're seeing on the ground there, is an item that some of the slimes dropped. Each time they have 3 different items with a 2% drop chance, so 6% total each time I kill one to drop one of their items. By the time we're done this, there's going to be a lot of items littering the ground. Next, I'm going to show off Push as a utility spell. Doesn't do any damage, but it's mainly there just to keep the enemies away from you. It pushes them further if you're more charged up. Still is kind of useful even with hardly any charging going on. But but it won't actually kill anything itself, so it's not going to be too overpowered, hopefully. And then the only other spell right now is that was a miscast. If I do the up, which generally means area of effect, like it does with Push, and the projectile motion, which is the right arrow you see, together those form this, which is just a multi-directional magic missiles. If you're in an open enough area, it does plenty of damage to everything. Alright, and I'm going to move over here just to do a little bit of reset. There's one other non-elemental spell that I haven't shown off right now, which is just called Light. You may have seen this in some other videos. It doesn't do very much except for blind you when you're in an area where it's not dark at all. I'm going to change the effect so it's a little less obnoxious, but the real utility of it is when you're in a dark area, it allows you to see. And that little left arrow when I cast it is basically the self-enchant motion. So that's self-enchanting non-elemental magic, just kind of makes light, essentially. Next up, we'll do some fire magic. This is the most basic fire magic spell. I'll cast a couple of them here. Just makes a little fire that lasts for about 10 seconds. I'm calling it bonfire. That's a big one. If you don't charge it up very much, you get these tiny little fires that don't do nearly as much damage. Yeah, so it looks like they're dissipating when enemies go through them, but really they're just expiring at about the same time. Generally you're going to get, and hopefully with all the spells in this game, you kind of get the most bang for your buck by charging them up pretty good, though it's not always necessary. It should be a trade-off to charging spells up really big. Next, you've probably seen Firebolt before. Just your average, ordinary projectile spell. Maybe one of the most basic. I'm aiming manually. I guess I've gotten kind of accurate from playing this game a bunch. Or playing any game with the dual thumbstick controls. Next up is Dragon's Breath, I think I'm calling it, which is just you're kind of surrounding yourself with flame. I'll also note that, yeah, these are the easiest enemies in the game, and this testing character is a little overpowered right now, so you're seeing me slice through things with ease. Plus, I'm leveling up as I do this, and that's increasing my stats, making me charge more, have more max spell power. So I'm only kind of getting better as we go. What else is next? Oh yes, this is the projectile and AoE fire magic spell that I'm calling Flare. It does very high damage, but it's slow moving. It doesn't do too much until it hits something, and then it does its little explosion. Kind of stole the concept of flare from some of the old Final Fantasy games. Pretty good option when you have some grouped up enemies, generally, and if you don't want to get close enough to them to use Fireball. And then the buffing fire spell, I'm just calling Haste, and it just increases your move speed, so you can see I'm very fast here, but still kind of juking these slimes. Nothing super exciting. I will say, whenever you have self-enchantments going, you can see a piece of my mana bar is gray right there, and that's because in order to keep the enchantment going, my character has to continue to channel it, which is taking up some of his focus. So he's unable to cast other spells that are quite as large while enchanted. And you can have a couple enchantments going at once, and it'll take up more and more of your mana bar to the point where the other spells you cast will be relatively small, or underpowered, but if the enchantments are giving you enough value, then it's worth it to keep your enchantment going. But I'm just going to take that off so I can show off the rest of the spells at full spell power. Next up is Ice Magic. This is the most basic spell that I showed off in the last video a little bit, with some shards of ice coming out. It's pretty wide spread when I'm fully charged up. When I'm just a little charged, you don't get nearly as many ice cubes, and they don't do nearly as much damage. So again, it's pretty worthwhile to really charge up. You can see the floor is just getting littered with items now from this 6% drop chance with the slimes. A couple different, yeah, that's all of the items that you can get from them. Next up is the Area of Effect ice spell. It's just a ring of these same ice shards. It really does, perhaps I'll have to change this, but does very good damage when they just kind of, when you're fighting a single enemy and you can slam all of the shards into that single enemy, does very good damage. I'll also point out that all of these ice spells, when they hit an enemy, you'll see some little snowflakes coming off of them, and that's because I've added a slowing effect to all ice spells. It only lasts for about 2 seconds or so, and slows them by 30%. I think I made it, just to give ice a little bit of control, a little crowd control, kind of a defensive property to it. Next up is, it took me a while to get this to look decent. This is Ice Beam, and don't have many beam effects in the game, but this is one of them. It's got a pretty good range on it. The one thing is, while you're channeling the beam, you can't change the direction of it, so whatever direction you shoot it off in, you're stuck with. This one is actually a little tougher to aim too, I would say, where auto aim might be an advantage. While it's going, there's a little bit of little snowflakes left over from channeling it. This is basically, yes, the ice projectile spell. And no self-enchantment and no AoE plus projectile spell in ice yet. I have to get around to making them, coming up with ideas still for them. All these little hearts on the ground, if you haven't noticed, are refilling my life. So I have pretty good armor here, so I'm not taking much damage from the slimes, but even if I were, oh, they're really ganging up on me, better use my push spell. I'll just run through some of these hearts and I'll get back up to full life in no time. And then finally, the other more fleshed out spell school I have is lightning, or electricity. I think I'll call it lightning magic. This is the most basic one. A little bit of inspiration from the Diablo 2 static bolt spell. I wanted to make lightning sort of powerful but random at the same time, a little less controlled than some of the other spell schools. So that's why these bolts, sometimes you're trying to shoot something right ahead of you, they'll just split, it doesn't even hit the thing. Sometimes all three will hit it. I think I have it just capped at 3 bolts, no matter how little or much power you have, but the damage does change based on how much spell power you channel into it. And then next up is good old-fashioned lightning bolt. This is the lightning projectile spell. Can do good damage again if a lot of the lightning bolts hit, but of course sometimes they could just go off to the side. So kind of random and unpredictable, but nonetheless powerful. And then this kind of goes against the philosophy of lightning, but I have no area of effect lightning spell yet, but area of effect plus projectile creates a chain lightning, which basically just goes through a line and jumps up to 5 times, or can hit 5 different enemies if 5 are present on the screen and they're all close enough to each other. And so it'll just hit, it'll go to the closest enemy to you, and then it'll jump to the next closest enemy to that enemy, and so on and so forth. I really have a lot of fun with this spell. And you can see it takes these guys out very quickly. Not so good if you're just fighting a single enemy, and if there's nothing close to you, it doesn't do anything except leave a little bit of lightning sitting around. But there's a pretty good range on this. 400 pixels, I think, is what I made the jump range. That. And then one other spell is the lightning self-enchant spell. So we're going to do lightning plus the left motion, and I'll probably update these icons so it's a little clearer what these directions mean. This one, you can see I'm shooting out these little lightning bolts periodically at the nearest enemy, but I'm not doing anything right now. I'm not casting anything. This is just a passive effect that I guess I'm calling lightning shield, and you can see it's doing pretty good damage. If I didn't even move, it's handling these guys for the most part. But the downside to that is you can see my spell power bar now is 90% gray, which means if I want to cast any other spells while this thing is going on me, that's as much spell power as I can muster. You can see I can do 8 damage with that. My magic missile is not even really visible, it's so skinny, and it's only shooting a single one. Let's see, my fireball is very tiny. So that is the trade-off. When you have a lot of enchantments going at once, you get a lot of passive value out of them, but it kind of limits the other things you can do. My push is kind of weak at this level of spell power. Now, if I wanted to, if I get rid of this, I get all my spell power bar back. And you can see my spell burst is now pretty huge, mainly because I started at level 7, and now I'm level 15. You get more of each stat, or rather I should say every level you get a little more hit points, a little more speed, a little more intellect, a little more focus, meaning a little more max spell power and faster spell power charging just from leveling up. Plus you get a random stat which does all those same kind of things. It makes you better at them. So now my character is even much more powered up than I was at the beginning of the video, probably from getting all this experience, three at a time from the slimes. But if I wanted to cast a much weaker static shield and not use up my whole bar, I can just let me cancel that and do it again. There we go. Now you can see I used up a quarter of my bar, but at the same time, these little shocks are doing 6 damage apiece. Not super overwhelming, but it makes me much more capable otherwise. So that's about it for showing off the spells. And I guess while I'm running around here, get rid of static shield. Let me haste myself, run away. Little bonus content is I've changed the enchanted forest a little bit, and I'll show you a much better use for the light spell, because as you go deeper into the forest, I'm just going to run past all the enemies here. It'll start to get darker, and you'll start to rely on these little fireflies to provide their source of light. And if we go in here, it's very dark and difficult to fight. Certainly very possible, but that's where the light spell comes in handy. I can just do this. Suddenly, very easy to fight anybody here. Even a blue mushroom that I'm still kind of fleshing out. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll be back again soon with another update.